Well, the night does not come up to be a peach for the University of Pittsburgh as Michigan State wins the Peach Bowl 31-21 over Pitt, completing their comeback and then securing the New Year's Six Bowl championship for the Big Ten and Spartan Nation. This is your Peach Bowl post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. I'm your host, as always, Mike Asti, and I am joined by PSN's Karl Ludwig, a familiar voice and face to Pittsburgh Sports Live and our network as well, to recap this game and, yes, discuss what the outcome would have been with Kenny Pickett versus, say, Kenneth Walker. Both of those two guys did not play in this game. Kenny Pickett was kind of a de facto offensive coordinator for Pitt, pumping his fists there with the coaches. Kenneth Walker MIA, but yeah, it's an impact not having those two guys, and certainly that last drive for Pitt maybe would have been different with Pickett. Maybe this whole game would have been different. Nonetheless, the Peach Bowl goes to Michigan State, and Pitt ends up with that special year. Doesn't diminish it, still a special year as ACC champion, but does not claim the Peach Bowl, the New Year's Six, the major bowl championship, and does not get that 12th win, which only would have been the second time in program history to match that national championship year of 1976. We have a lot of chat action, so we'll go to you guys in the chat as well. I thought we'd have some action here for this one. Again, our post-game coverage is over there at Pittsburgh Sports Now, our game recap, and we will have tons of coverage there, as well as video reaction here from Narduzzi and company here on PSL as well. Karl, I do want to ask you that overlying question here, as we have a lot to unpack. Obviously, Pitt didn't just miss Kenny Pickett. Patty, who you got to feel bad for the kid, honestly, whether you like Pitt or not, gets his opportunity. This is after Pitt also brings in a transfer in Slovis, who's likely taking the reins next year, barring a camp battle. Gets a series or so, gets hurt, doesn't get to see the action that he thought he would have, at least in this game. Kenny Pickett probably upset for the kid as their personal friends. You get the third string quarterback for Pitt, who is a wild unknown and just as polarizing as Patty. Plays okay, certainly under the circumstances, but Pitt certainly handcuffed having the QB3 out there. Would this game have been different? Are you able to comfortably say Pitt would have won this game with how it unraveled, knowing Kenneth Walker was also not out there and handcuffed Michigan State as well? Would Pitt have won this if Kenny Pickett played, just at all, whether it'd even be an A-plus game from Pickett?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's tough to speculate on that kind of stuff, but I think if Kenny Pickett's in there with his talent, scrambling, just his usual game, I think Pitt rolls pretty easily in that game. I mean, it's tough to kind of pile on to Bevel there, but he's a statue back there. I mean, the offensive line tonight wasn't great, but he was just getting his awareness back there, his timing, his just throwing the ball for him was a struggle tonight. So I mean, if Pickett's in there in any capacity, I think it's a much, much better outcome for Pitt in the end there.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that. Certainly, if you have about 3 minutes to go, 2:51 to be exact, you're looking for just a field goal to at least get it to overtime, especially with the pass defense for Michigan State. They left Addison wide open, and Addison would have been Peach Bowl MVP if Pitt would have won this game. You figure even more from Addison with Pickett out there. That's what RG3 was talking about on the broadcast. And even if you didn't get more from Addison, you feel like Pickett would have at least taken better care of the football, which is how he became a Heisman candidate. But nonetheless, Michigan State, as we said, they do win it. They are Peach Bowl champs. They do represent the Big Ten over the ACC with that Peach Bowl victory. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. Now, for who was on the field? Kenny Pickett was not there. Who was on the field? And Pitt almost won this game without him. The matchup was favorable for Pitt because of the weak pass defense for MSU. Even thinking Nick Patty was going to play, I don't know about the thought of a third string, but even with him out there playing okay, honestly, at times, despite struggling early. How did this game shake out for you? How did Michigan State mount this comeback for you? Or did Pitt maybe blow this a little bit? Obviously some controversy at the end. Michigan State actually getting robbed of what I felt was a touchdown. It didn't look like they ever had their tight end out of bounds there. It looked like he was clearly in and then got himself the end zone. The whistle was blown earlier. You see Connor Hayward with a big man TD grab there apparently has some air under him as well as being built like a truck. I believe our Alan Saunders put it that way, and that's just a perfect description. So Michigan State got the job done. They did what they had to do, but this is a Michigan State team that struggled really early. They couldn't find themselves offensively without Kenneth Walker, who's like their quarterback. That's how driven they are on offense. A similar hit to losing Pickett for them. But they were able to figure it out, a completely different team, certainly in the fourth quarter compared to the first three quarters of this game. How did MSU do it? Or did Pitt eventually show the weakness of not being as dynamic without, say, Pickett? And maybe Pitt can still kind of look to themselves, we blew this a little bit, even with our third string, or what changed for Michigan State?
Right. Well, I mean, the offense for Pitt in the second half was pretty atrocious. I mean, there was like 75 yards of total offense in the second half there, like 15 total plays. The defense was on the field a whole lot in the second half, and for the most part, they're a pretty good team. But for the Michigan State offense there, Thorne was pretty good, and that duo of Jalen Reed and Jaden Naylor, phenomenal. The touchdown catch from Reed there to kind of seal it was over Devonshire was incredible. They both were just kind of unguardable as the second half wore on, and that was really a big difference for him.
Reed mossed him. I mean, he mossed him. That hopefully that gets on Sunday. Honestly, that should get on Randy Moss. He throws those highlights up there. I feel like that's you got mossed. That got to be a clip.
I agree. Both of them, Naylor and Reed, were just phenomenal throughout the entire game. But really, in the second half, as it wore down, those two, Connor Hayward, Malik Carr, they kind of just wore Pitt's secondary down, and there wasn't enough consistent pressure throughout the entire game on Thorne to really kind of get in his head. There was a point in the second half, beginning of the second half, where he was a little bit shaky, but he bounced back in a huge way, and he was a huge factor in the second half for Michigan State, and that was ultimately the deciding factor there as well.
Do you notice anything schematically the Michigan State changed as far as second half adjustments? Because Pitt got sluggish offensively. They ended up getting down to the QB3 as we keep mentioning, which is certainly going to be a theme of this game. But Michigan State was also, and you mentioned the highlight reel play from Reed, the Moss catch, the Connor's reception there to get himself, Connor Hayward to get himself in the end zone. Anything schematically the Michigan State Mel Tucker did differently, though, to ignite that offense? Because honestly, if we were talking at halftime, doing a halftime show here, I was thinking that, Pitt was down to QB3. It wasn't looking bright for Pitt's offense, but hey, they could win this game 21-10. I don't know if Michigan State's going to put anything else together. And Michigan State has had games like that where they just didn't show up offensively, even with Kenneth Walker there. He's not there. It's hard to even come back with a ground attack team and a run first team. They're not normally a team that can do it with a quarterback who struggled most of this game. I could say I'm kind of surprised that all of a sudden their offense turned it on. The quarterback threw some key passes. They were able to do it with his arm, and they look like a completely different team in the second half.
Yeah, well, I think Michigan State was a little too run heavy in the first half there. It was like 30 carries to 15 passes, and Pitt's run defense was good throughout the entire game. I think Thorne had 50 passes at the end there, so he let it rip, and the comeback routes just killed Pitt's secondary. I mean, Reed and Naylor were just open every time, grabbed the ball, got 15 yards consistently, and those were backbreakers because a lot of on the last drive there were a bunch of third and long conversions that kind of just broke Pitt down. And then obviously the mossing was just demoralizing. But
yeah, I
think just throwing the ball a bit more, not having to hit Pitt's rush defense, which was very good today, was really just a big second half adjustment. And Pitt's secondary kind of got beat, just kind of got beaten down as the game went on. And it happens. They were on the field a lot. It wasn't the best of circumstances with the offense going through some struggles.
Yeah, and we're seeing a lot of chat action here. It's always fun when you get these. A lot of opposing fans here to our network, Michigan State fans jumping in here with a lot of celebration. Hey, Michigan State had a special year, only the fifth time in Michigan State Spartan program history to win 11 games. They felt like they could even have done more this year. Mel Tucker getting another decade-long contract. They feel like it's open for them to keep building on this, and they felt Kenneth Walker should have been a Heisman finalist, and they had a great year. So Michigan State certainly deserves it. They were without their guy as well, and they did it in a tough conference and won the Peach Bowl and won a major championship bowl game. And again, tip of the cap to Michigan State here. As media, obviously, that covers Pitt, but even for the Pitt fan that are here in the chat that are hearing it from Michigan State, you can go to this comment here by Joe. great game by Pitt. Really proud of the team. Disappointing result, but given the circumstances, it was a great performance. That's also true. So I don't think Pitt in any way are going to hang their head from this game. They're out there with QB3. They were out there with the backup to start this game. They knew the circumstances. They played like they should have won this game. They probably feel like they should have won this game. I'm sure Pickett feels that a little bit in his heart. Sorry for the guys. We get why he made the decision. I think even everyone does, really. Narduzzi made the comment that if he would have got hurt in this game, he couldn't live with it. Pitt players aren't going to hold it against Pickett. The risk of getting injured in this game for the reward of a major bowl game when you can't win a national title with what he had in front of him, the bag from the NFL, is a first-round pick for sure, if not top 15 or top 10. Too risky to play, but, a lot of heart for the Pitt team for sure, and they certainly cannot hold their head low. They should not hold their head low. They certainly had a great year, better than many expectations, and it's also interesting for Pitt to have their defense let them down in those losses earlier in the season, certainly against Western Michigan, but even against Miami, and then pick themselves up in this game, pick themselves up in the ACC championship game. The defense played well down the stretch. If the defense didn't play as well as they did down the stretch, Pitt would not have won their conference. They wouldn't have been in this game without Pickett. So tip of the cap as well to the Pitt defense. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here, our Pitt Peach Bowl post-game show here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. Again, our game recap over there at PSN. Follow us also on Twitter at PGH Sports Now and at PGH Sports Live for all of our coverage on social media. Now, Karl, any thoughts, and you didn't get to see him much, but any thoughts about, what you did see from Nick Patty, even what you did see from Bevel? Obviously, Slovis comes in feeling like he's going to be the guy, comes in as an All-American in the Pac-12, did lead USC to the Pac-12 championship game, even though this past season, not what the Trojans would want. Is it a camp battle? Does Patty have a chance in camp? Is Patty just going to have to realize this was his only opportunity, that he's never really going to see the field again? What are your thoughts on Pitt's quarterback depth and Pitt's quarterback situation? Because that was also a discussion that was had on social media, of a conversation on not only Patty and the polarizing effect there, but there are some who believe in the quarterback three. There are some that hate the man. That's a polarizing situation. But now you bring in a transfer with the new rules. He can play right away. Pitt may have shockingly some quarterback depth there. Is there any chance that Slovis doesn't start game one, the backyard brawl?
Well, I think Slovis is your starter next season, but as Narduzzi has said many times, it'll be a competition, but I think Slovis will win it. It's tough tonight to watch that for Nick Patty, because he worked so hard all season to get this chance. He came out, he battled, he had that, right. He was 2 of 5, a couple drops, made that 2 of 5, but he threw the ball well, he ran the ball well, opening touchdown, has him in a tie game, and his shoulder just gives out, and it's tough to see that. It's tough to have to watch him kind of like break his heart like that, but yeah, it really was it's a missed chance for him. This was an audition for either Pitt or a different team if he chooses to go that route, and I think it will be him if he stays sitting behind Kedon Slovis again next year. And in terms of Bevel, I mean, it was a tough situation for him. I mean, he didn't expect to play tonight. He didn't practice much with any of the reps. Right. For what he was given and what he was told to do, it wasn't a bad game per se. It wasn't very good either. Sure. It's tough to blame him too much for the game tonight, but obviously he has a lot of growing to do if he ever wants to be a big time college quarterback. So I don't think he'll be in much kind of the conversation for next season. I do think it'll be Slovis next season.
Yeah, it is weird though to think how much depth is at the University of Pittsburgh when there's some other teams that are looking for the QB1, despite the transfer rules, like the whole debate on the other side of the football in the backyard brawl and what West Virginia's maybe going to do. Some don't even feel like they have that QB1 in Jared Taggy, who likely is the guy and is the veteran there. And Pitt got a whole slew. You can try to just pick off the Pitt roster at this point to try to regroup things on the other side of the football. But Bevel does go 14 for 18, 77%, 149 a TD, a pick. Of course, the pick at the worst time there at the end to secure things once Pitt finally got in what could have been long field goal range or getting close to long field goal range after the Addison catch, which almost was a demoralizing catch just emotionally in this game because it felt like Michigan State just could not cover him. He was wide open. Their pass defense, which is just horrendous in general, they got here despite that, left him open. And it, if you're Pitt's coaching staff, if you're Bevel, you're probably thinking, we're just going to keep focusing on Addison. 1 or 2 more catches, we at least got a field goal here because they can't cover him, and they're not even trying to do so really with that pass defense. But again, Bevel 14 for 18, 149, a TD, a pick. He was sacked 5 times, and Nick Patty 2 for 5. 21 yards, didn't really get a crack at things, and then had to stand there in his shoulder sling the rest of the game. So again, you feel for him there. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here. Our Peach Bowl postgame show on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now. Why did Michigan State leave Addison so wide open the whole game? I mean, Addison's a beast. He's going to be at the next level. He's only going to keep getting better. He certainly can take over games. And I totally get Michigan State's pass defense sucks. And that's what I'm still hearing right now in replies on Twitter. I get it. That's why some thought Michigan State would lose this game no matter who's the quarterback for Pitt. Totally get it. But it feels like you still can't leave Addison that wide open. It wasn't even like they were poorly covering when they're trying to cover. That final catch, he's out there by himself. What was Michigan State doing defensively? And if you take away that pick, did Michigan State's defense almost deserve to kind of lose this game? Or did that almost take them off from being the GOAT of this game? And I mean negatively, the scapegoat of this game, despite what was happening with Pitt having a quarterback 3 out there and not able to do much in the second half, and Michigan State's offense eventually propelled. Plenty of time, Pitt was moving the ball. And again, Addison almost single-handedly won this game for Pitt.
Yeah, no, he definitely did. He's a very special player, and I know that's a bad pass defense, but it really, really is bad. I mean,
really bad, man.
The one short catch he had from Bevel where he took it 50 yards. I mean, there were 4 guys around him, and not one of them even touches him. It was right. It was bizarre to see that they just were so unaware in the secondary there, but. Give credit to the front 7 was very good tonight. They crushed the Pitt line tonight. It was a pretty poor showing from them.
I was going to go there. Yeah,
it was a pretty show pouring from the offensive line. So Bevel wasn't given much help. But then again, if he has any mobility, he can make some moves there. So I mean, it was unfortunate that he didn't have time to kind of sit back and really take advantage of the secondary there, because there was so much pressure in his face throughout most of the game, and he couldn't really escape that on his own. So. It was a bit lucky in a way for Michigan State well, I guess not lucky. It was a good game plan to attack the offensive line and not allow the defense to get exposed on the back end. So the game plan worked for him pretty well tonight.
Yeah, it did. And again, it was a favorable matchup for Pitt in that regard, and it almost got Pitt a victory with their quarterback 3 out there. From Michigan State fans here in the chat, our secondary is garbage. Well, yeah. I mean, clearly that was evident in this game again. Despite the celebration, Pickett would have torched them. Probably the case. Again, certainly would have taken better care of the football, and you would think that Addison would go from the game that he had to even more, especially if he's left that wide open. Just incredible. Addison 7 catches for 114, didn't get himself in the end zone, had the 52-yarder. That Karl brought up, but it could even have been more. We've seen even more from him at games. Vincent Davis got 43. Addison actually got 28 yards on the ground as well. Patty had that big run early in the game prior to getting hurt. So Pitt, something on the ground, not as much as we've seen second half of the year, which also made it easier for Pitt in the offense to finally get versatile that they weren't the beginning of the season. I do want to touch on, though, what you touched on before I go back to the chat. Yeah, Pitt has the quarterback 3 out there. Yeah, they started this game with the backup. I can't say either one played great. Honestly, you look at the numbers, though. I don't think anyone can criticize Bevel, even with that late game interception as the QB3 coming out there. Those aren't bad numbers at all. Patty was building on something despite struggling early and didn't get to play much. Do you maybe give this more of a blame to the offensive line for Pitt? 5 sacks in this game against Bevel, who is a quarterback 3 and does not get to practice nearly as much as the other guys, maybe a little bit more than normal this week because Pickett was definitely not going to play. But still, the reps went to Patty. The offensive line did not help out their guy, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. I think it goes hand in hand. Bevel isn't very mobile back there, which, I mean, that you can't really change that. That's who he is as a quarterback.
Right.
And when the line is just getting bull rushed and beaten every play almost, it's tough for him to kind of get any rhythm as a quarterback, like you said, who hasn't had any practice or any preparation for this game. So it was a tough situation for him, and he made the most of what he could do. Wasn't wasn't great, wasn't terrible. The pick obviously will be the talking point. But yeah, he wasn't given much help in the line, which is kind of surprising considering how good the line has been throughout much of the season. It was it's the guys back next year, so it's not
Right.
a huge concern for him, but it was definitely a surprise to see him kind of struggle so badly against a good, not excellent Michigan State pass rush.
And the offensive line had also improved as the season progressed.
Yeah.
And that's part of Kenny Pickett being a Heisman finalist. You can't do it without your offensive line, no matter what you are, no matter how good you are. We've seen that with the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're hampering their quarterback as well, even though Ben has struggled at times. The offensive line is where it's at. It's an unsung hero of every good team, and certainly maybe an underrated weakness of a lot of bad teams out there. The offensive line did not show up to be at their best in this game, and it eventually led to Pitt losing the Peach Bowl. Michigan State does claim the Peach Bowl championship as they get to dine on Chick-fil-A as we're speaking. Some Chick-fil-A sandwiches and peaches for the Michigan State Spartans on this night. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here on Pittsburgh Sports Live and Pittsburgh Sports Now, our Peach Bowl post-game show. And obviously an end of a bowl game also means an end of a season for a team. This was a special year for the Pitt Panthers. 11 wins. Would have been the second time in program history, as successful as that history is for the Pitt Panthers, to win 12 games, 1976 the other. They don't do that, but they win the ACC. Yeah, you can say the conference is a bit down. Their elite teams aren't what maybe they were advertised to be when the conference formed or realigned to be what it was. Clemson, which had a dynasty, takes a little bit of a year off this year, even though they certainly got better as the year progressed and likely back next year. But Pitt claims the ACC crown, can't take it away from them. They ended with a Heisman candidate, which I don't think anyone thought entering the season either for Pitt. Certainly didn't predict this for Pickett even a couple years ago. Whipple gets recognized for awards. He then does leave to Nebraska. Narduzzi recognizes as a head coach for individual success. He quiets his doubters and goes from being on a hot seat earlier in the season to locked up and all Pitt fans loving him and apologizing to him and claiming they were wrong about him. So this season kind of came up to be a peach for Pitt, even without winning the Peach Bowl. How would you rate this year for Pitt? What does this mean to the Pitt program, knowing the history of the program, knowing what they've been in recent years and struggling to get to this point, even with Narduzzi under that Narduzzi era, and to the future of this program, Slovis coming to Pitt, still having Addison around. You do maybe have more experience from the O-line, even though they need to be better. The defense also improving, even though you are losing some key guys. Yeah, the conference maybe will get better. Maybe Clemson will be back. Obviously, Wake Forest still going to have their guy under center. But what are your thoughts on this season for Pitt and even moving forward, as it feels like Pitt's building something? This does not feel like an aberration to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be a 10 this year. I mean, there was two bad losses.
Right.
But other than that, it was almost a perfect season for him. Well, I guess three losses now with it.
Sure. I don't know if this is a bad one, but two bad losses.
This isn't a bad loss. It's
right.
It's a bowl game, it's whatever. But I think it has to be a 10. Everything that you needed to have happen this year kind of happened. I do think it's the start of a nice kind of extended run now for Pat Narduzzi and company. Kenny Pickett might be a program changer in the long run for Pitt. I mean, I don't think they get Keaton Slovis without Pickett's success this year. I think
that's fair. Yeah.
I think he really is going to be a program changer for a push here now toward more relevancy. Because I mean, the ACC, for all that it is, I'm sure it will probably get better next season and as we go on, but it's still not it's not an SEC or a Big Ten. So Pitt, there's no reason why Pitt shouldn't be a consistent contender for not just Coastal, but overall ACC championships now. And it all begins with 11 wins this year, with an ACC title, with Kenny Pickett. So it was a great year for Pitt. I think there's nothing to be ashamed of. Right. Tough loss tonight, but you're with your third string quarterback against a very good Michigan State team. There's not much more you can ask for this year. You have to replace a couple guys on the coaching staff. Got to replace a couple key guys in the lineup, but next year should be a great one for Pitt again. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. And
you have Addison back. I mean, that's not a small deal. Generally speaking, when you're graduating a Heisman finalist, you're generally also graduating or losing that top weapon like Addison that helped him get there. A lot of those players and those teams and those positions have veterans across the board that are usually leaving around the same time. Not always the case, but sometimes. Not the case here for Pitt. So you have Addison to come back. That's going to elevate any quarterback. And you mentioned Kenny Pickett's success is probably why Slovis came, or at least part of it. I would certainly agree. The other end of it is Addison's success and being a Blitnikoff candidate. That's why Slovis is there as well, because he's coming from California to the cold of Pittsburgh because of the offensive explosion without the offensive coordinator and a defensive-minded head coach. Part of that is also having that receiver there and seeing what even a third string quarterback can do with it. I'm sure he got to be watching this salivating. Yeah. I got to win the job, and once I do, look at the numbers we're going to put up. He probably is thinking to himself, whether I'm a Heisman candidate or not, I want to show that I'm just as good or better as Pickett with this receiver. So he can kind of prove himself as an individual, a great quarterback as a recruit himself, and then did it in the Pac-12. Many East Coast fans might not watch those games, but certainly had success there. And his only negative year was in the midst of COVID. So he can take that mulligan and see what happens in moving forward. That's part of it as well. And Addison certainly can elevate and doesn't diminish Pickett either, as Pickett helped Addison become what he became in this season for this team, and even in this game. As again, he almost stole this game. Michigan State, though, does win the Peach Bowl. Let me check the chat here real quick. If we're being realistic, anything more than 7 wins should be considered a successful season. Pitt has a chance to put together a strong season next year, but in the long term, Pitt is a mid-tier program. I mean, going into this year, some were predicting anywhere from 7 to 9 wins for Pitt. They certainly weren't predicting an ACC crown, no matter what anybody thought about any of these other teams. Granted, likely a surprise that Clemson wasn't as good as they've been, despite double-digit victories this year. So they did end on a positive note, and maybe Pitt got lucky. They avoided a rematch with Clemson. I did say that at the time that might have been a little different. Clemson got a hair from getting back in that game, beating Dabo and Clemson twice in the same year in a matter of months when they finally got better. Would have been hard for me to believe, but does not in any way diminish Pitt winning the ACC. And Pitt being a mid-tier program, I will say to that, Carl, and you can get your thoughts as well, being that recruiting guy, Kenny Pickett single-handedly could have changed that. It's not to say Pitt is not a mid-tier program. They are not Ohio State. They're not Alabama. But Pitt certainly in the ACC, in what they're dealing with, maybe they're never even going to be Clemson and put together a 6-7 year stretch where you're in the playoff 90+% of the time and winning multiple national titles and playing for them every year. Maybe Pitt will never be that. But Pitt seized the day. They won a conference championship when they got a Heisman candidate. Pitt actually showed the blueprint for programs similar to Pitt, that once in a while, if you catch that special year and you have a team that's good enough, Pitt could actually have won a national title this year, and it's not crazy to say that. They should have beat Western Michigan. You lose by 1 with 6 TDs from Kenny Pickett. Your defense shows up a little bit. You win that game. Then you only have 1 loss. It's a conference loss to a team that ended up being bowl eligible. Yeah, Cincinnati got in. They had the win over Notre Dame. They probably would have still got in being undefeated, but you don't know. The committee maybe prefers a major conference champion instead of Cincinnati. You really, really don't know. That could have been a nail biter. Pitt also probably should have beaten Miami. They certainly were a better team than Miami this year. Certainly, if Pitt is an undefeated ACC champ, even if they don't have as good of a win as Cincy does with that win over Notre Dame, you got to feel like Pitt probably would have been number 4. Cincinnati might have been outside looking in again, number 5, maybe Notre Dame, number 6. Maybe you slide everybody down. Maybe you don't. Maybe it's a debate forever and Pitt feels like they got screwed, but a major conference champ undefeated, you feel like they probably would have got in. And once they get in with that offense, it's feeling like probably Kenny Pickett he might play if it's a playoff game and you can win a national title. That could be a different scenario. That's actually what Gary Stokan told me when I talked to him here on this channel before the game, the Peach Bowl president and CEO, that's his call. That's his fix, is to expand the playoff. It would obviously include the Peach Bowl. They'd be part of it next year. And then he feels like players wouldn't skip out on a playoff game. This would have been a first-round matchup if you expand things likely. Maybe even at 8, maybe at 12. Who knows? But this was one of those years that even could have been more for Pitt. So it could build off of that. Now that Kenny Pickett's there, you have a transfer like Slovis wanting to come. You still have a Blitnikoff winner. You're getting all these individual awards. You don't know about next year. This could make it something else. Is there any taste in your mouth here covering Pitt that it's a special year, a 10 out of 10, but it also could have been more? Or does it maybe just show you the glimpse of what I'm saying, that, yeah, it wasn't that this year, but there is a blueprint for you. You can no longer say that a program like Pitt cannot win a national title in this system. They can. If they took care of business, they may have done so this year, surprisingly so.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Pitt was a national title contender, even if they go unbeaten. I mean, they probably.
You don't think they get in if they're undefeated versus that Cincinnati resume?
They could. I'd say getting in is
okay.
I think they could, if they had gone unbeaten, there's a strong chance they'd be in. But I doubt.
I don't think they'd beat Alabama either. Right.
Right. I doubt that if they get in, they wouldn't make much noise. But they could definitely be. They could be a contender to get in if they had been unbeaten. I'm fully with you on that. So.
You just want to get in, though. You never know. I mean,
yeah, of course.
You never know.
Getting in that'd be a huge thing for them.
Right.
It obviously could have happened if they had done just enough to beat Miami and Western Michigan.
Yeah, you lose by 4 points in those two games combined, right?
Yeah.
3 or 4, something like that.
I guess, so in that range there, but it definitely could have been more. But it's tough to be too upset about what the season was, all things considered. And I don't think it will have. They won't have a Clemson-like run where it's ACC dominance, but this should be a blueprint for in every 2, 3, 4 years. They should be a legit contender to be a conference champion and also a dark horse playoff team. Because because they are a mid-tier team. I mean, they're not a blue blood. They're not a power team.
Sure.
But they should be a team who can compete every cycle based off the guys they bring in and develop, which is what happened this year with Kenny Pickett. If they can bring in the right guys continually, they should be a team that competes on a consistent basis, and every couple years have that one really, really good year like this season. And that should be the blueprint going forward.
And I think that's absolutely doable, and it's absolutely fair to say here. Some more in the chat here, although now we're getting into the weeds of just ridiculousness. Western Michigan destroyed Pitt. That's just not factually accurate. Like that's just not the case if you look at the score of the game. And again, Kenny Pickett actually tied a program record with 6 TD passes in that game. Again, the defense let him down, and it's still a loss, but nobody destroyed anybody in a game like that when you're looking at a 1-point difference. Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here, our Peach Bowl post-game show, Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now. Again, head over to PSN for all our game recap coverage as Pitt goes down to a third-string quarterback. Some of you maybe didn't even know the name, Bevel. Played admirably, throws that pick at the end, and Michigan State holds on. They mount a comeback and win the Peach Bowl. They do it for the Big Ten, which certainly you could argue is the best conference all year, better conference than the ACC, but Pitt ACC champs nonetheless. So they will have that trophy, and still being in this game, a big deal for the Pitt program. Would you say, as the defending ACC champ who gets in the Peach Bowl, even though you don't win, you play it close and you almost win with your string quarterback, knowing Slovis is coming, knowing next year, knowing Addison will still be there? Yeah, Clemson's going to be back as well. They win the Cheez-It Bowl. They feel like they're improving. Dabo's confident. He's celebrating now. A giant Cheez-Its, feeding him a bowl of Cheez-Its. It was weird for them, but they keep up their dynasty of double-digit victories despite not getting in the playoff. Is Pitt the favorite to repeat as ACC champion? Is it fair to say they're a preseason favorite? Is Pitt a preseason top 10 team or not? Because of, say, Clemson being back, because of the landscape, because Pickett's not going to be there, whatever the reasoning would then be that would hold Pitt from deserving that preseason honor of a top 10 ACC favorite for next year.
I would probably say ACC Coastal favorite for sure.
Okay.
It's gonna be tough to be ahead of Wake Forest or Clemson on the Atlantic side, but definitely a top 15 worthy team. Definitely ACC,
but not top 10.
Just based on,
I said top 10. You're trying to you're giving me the lawyer answer there. You're trying to dance.
I would say not top 10, top 15 worthy. I'd say 12 to 15 would be probably their range next season, and then probably not. I feel
like you hedged your bets a little bit there. I feel like everyone's going to agree top 15.
10 to top 10 is that's a big distinction. Top 15, top 10 is a huge difference, I think.
No, it is. It is.
It's just tough to have those, like they'll have like 8 SEC schools in there, and that'll be tough to pass up any of those ones.
Yeah, and to be fair, and again, wild question marks around West Virginia. That's Pitt's week 1 opponent next year to rebirth the backyard brawl. Even if they beat down the Mountaineers, say Jared Dagey is still the starter with what they're losing and what the season was this year for West Virginia. that's probably not enough to put them anywhere further into the top 10 if, say, they start out top 15. They're not going to really be able to impress the ranking early in the season either with the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, Pitt just has to win next season. I mean, they have to they had to come out and just do this season again and try to avoid the pitting to the smaller schools. I mean, if they can do it next season, come out strong, go draw 5-0, get into ACC play, they'll probably be a top 10 team at that point. I'm not sure preseason where they'll be, probably pretty high in the general scale of things. But if they can just win, if they just win games, they'll be all right. They'll be a top 10 team.
What would be Pitt's weakness moving forward here? That's a question in the chat. And then also about any cornerback or any secondary help coming in terms of recruits, because some of the chat action here feels like that obviously is the defensive weakness for Pitt moving forward still.
Well, I think offensively, fine. As of right now, Brendan Marion's leaving for Texas. He's taken off. Tim Salem was not a very good play caller tonight. He needs to go back to his tight end position spot. So the big question now is who's going to call plays next year? Is it going to be a guy already on the staff, which you'd hope not now that Marion is gone? So who can they find out there to come in and call plays? So the offensive personnel player wise is pretty much set already. That we know who's there, we know who's good, we know who's not. The play caller will be a huge decision now for Pat Narduzzi, and he's known to make hires based off of the older, more established guys.
Right, Mark Whipple, right, yeah.
Right, and Tim Salem in the bowl game as his buddy, right. And so the biggest question on offense now is finding out who will call the plays for offense.
Is it that big of a deal though? If that decision is a bad one, can that ruin the building of this program and take a year off or so until they find another guy? Is that how much credit that Mark Whipple deserves? Or not taking anything away from Mark Whipple, but Kenny Pickett also has to give credit his emergence himself, or is that partly Mark Whipple? Is that important, the play caller? Because there's people who think it's overrated. There's people who think it's underrated. They blame everything on the OC. They give it to the players when they have success. How important is that decision on that offensive coordinator for you?
Well, I'd say even in tonight's game, Salem did a pretty poor job, I'd say. Looking back at one play, the 3rd and 1 pitch to a 5'8" Vincent Davis was a horrid decision. They punt the ball there, score. They come back and win the game. It's just you have to find the guy who can work with the personnel he has and make the players around him better. Kenny Pickett and Whipple had a fantastic relationship. They spent years building that. Right. But obviously, their success went hand in hand. You can't just bring in some random guy off the street and have him come out there and expect to call the plays well. You have to find the guy who's going to fit the offense well. And clearly, Tim Salem wasn't it. Great tight ends coach, not a very good coordinator.
You've seen enough. You're looking at one game here. You've seen enough.
It's a disaster. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, great tight ends coach. Need to find someone who can call plays now.
And I would imagine, from what we're hearing, and kind of, I mean, that was a temporary decision. In no way does that give him the job. That was a temporary. Yeah, that was a temporary decision. Yeah. So that's not likely to be the guy. But the Marion hit is maybe more of a story, because that could have been a guy for the future. That could have been a guy that some thought you'd have to give the job to, even though he hadn't really called play as the wide receiver coach, because otherwise you're going to lose him. Well, it looks like they lost him. Yeah. He was that young coach waiting in the wings. Mike and I actually had a show prior to even the Whipple news coming out, in which he was saying, hey, look to Marion. They're going to have to make this decision. Maybe Whipple has to go before we even knew that Whipple was going to go, because you're going to lose Marion if you don't have Whipple go. And then Whipple goes anyway. Kind of that relationship when Narduzzi came to a head, and likely that was what was going to happen all year long. Maybe even they knew that prior to the season. I don't know if Pickett knew it. He kind of seemed surprised, but that was kind of in the cards. The Marion thing, maybe they thought they had more time with him. Maybe they don't cherish him enough to give him the job. Maybe that was what he learned, and then he's elsewhere. Who knows? Again, Karl Ludwig, Mike Asti here, Pittsburgh Sports Live, Pittsburgh Sports Now. Pitt does not win the Peach Bowl here on our Peach Bowl postgame show. Karl, I guess to close up shop here, not only on this Peach Bowl postgame show, but on this season for Pitt, and obviously we will have more coverage, more commentary, more shows of any other news erupts, certainly, throughout our network in general, but maybe even football, depending on what goes on. And Kenny Pickett's looking at the NFL draft, so we might have joint coverage with Pittsburgh Sports Now and even Steelers Now, and all of that. So it's still full steam ahead with some Pitt talk and Pitt coverage. Don't go away from the channel or the network of Pittsburgh Sports Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live. But as we stand now, whether it be the future of the Pitt program, whether it be this season, even this game, if you want to say something about Michigan State and their season as well, they do win the Peach Bowl. It was a special surprising year for Michigan State as well. Last year, they were bad. So to put this together was just as surprising, and Mel Tucker is going to be there for years to come, but didn't have the pedigree that even Narduzzi had, to his critics' chagrin prior to this year. Any final thoughts?
I think overall it's just I think it was a fun season for Pitt. It can be tough. It can be tough being a Pitt fan. There have been some years where it's been hard to watch games. Kenny Pickett made Pitt fun again. It was fun to watch their games. The team had fun. The fans had fun. There's no shame in losing to Michigan State in the Peach Bowl. I think overall it was the season had to happen, and it happened at a great time. And I think Pitt's in for a very good season next year.
Yeah, and I think it did happen at the perfect time. It was surprising, but, you also kind of, whether you're a Pitt fan or not, at least myself, you also kind of like covering and watching a season in which people out there who work their butts off basically can give a middle finger to their critics. And that's really the case for Pat Narduzzi. That's the case for Kenny Pickett. Everyone loving him, saying the Steelers got to draft him, all these Pittsburgh fans. We're looking at 2 years ago, the same people blamed everything on Kenny Pickett.
Even this season after Western Michigan.
Honestly, yeah. Oh, we did a show. I mean, Mike Bakovic, our fearless leader here, he formed the network. He admitted he had a commentary out there that he was wrong on Pat Narduzzi. I mean, Pat Narduzzi had all these kinds of critics. People wanted him fired 2.5 months ago. And I don't know if Kenny Pickett was criticized this year, not for that game, but was certainly criticized recently to maybe, is he the guy? There's nobody thought he'd be winning any type of individual award, setting any records, being a Heisman candidate, and being a top 15 pick that maybe even the Steelers can't even go get because he's going to be taken prior to them selecting. Nobody had any money on that a year or so ago, even during the COVID years. So Heather Lyke was getting criticized. Maybe you're letting Narduzzi stick around too long. You're trusting Narduzzi too much. Are you friends? What's going on? All these, even Mark Whipple in a way. He had the career resume, but didn't do it at Pitt. Pickett proved continuity can help him. He finally got continuity with the coaching staff, with an OC. He probably wouldn't have came back unless Whipple was still there one more year. Him coming back makes himself a lot of money regardless of the team and certainly his legacy. So Pitt fans, the Pitt program, yeah, this was the year though, and sometimes you have this, that Pitt had to grab the bull by the horns. Pickett was going to leave after this year. Addison was developing. Narduzzi's seat was getting warmer. Heather Lyke's seat was getting warmer in terms of criticism. And Clemson was a bit off. Miami's still not back to glory. Florida State's maybe even further away from glory. This was the year to grab the bull by the horns and carpe diem it. And Pitt did it. They did. So they got the job done. Who knows about the future? They're building something, I would imagine. But nonetheless, and regardless of the future, Pitt got the job done. Pitt was it for 2021. And that's regardless of what happened in that Peach Bowl. That'll do it for this show, as I think we won a championship on the quality of this show, even though Pitt did not win one here in this major bowl game. But they won a championship nonetheless in the ACC, which is certainly something to be proud of for the Pitt program. Sorry to who I didn't get to in the chat. Feel free to chat along on future shows. And a lot of action here, but a lot of it was just kind of either celebrating, commemorating, or commiserating. So I'll let you guys kind of go. For Karl Ludwig, for all of us at Pittsburgh Sports Now and Pittsburgh Sports Live, special year for Pitt. It does not end chomping on some peaches and Chick-fil-A sandwiches, but nonetheless, Pitt has everything to be proud of and nothing to be ashamed of. Pitt loses in the Peach Bowl to Michigan State 31-21. Michigan State is your Peach Bowl champion. That'll do it for our coverage of this season for the Pitt Panthers.